Welcome back to the YouTube home for BamaOnLine.com. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BOL, alongside site publisher Tim Watts on a Tuesday, January the 16th, 2024. And Tim, since we last met yesterday, just a few things have gone down the pike between Travaris Robinson and then also looking at Kane Wommack and some of the other things that we've learned from a transfer portal perspective. You had a 5-star of note make his way to Tuscaloosa on Monday as well. Just a few things, Tim.
Yeah, it got busy, especially last night. It's kind of funny because hours before there was an entire tizzy. I mean, grown people losing their mind over a tweet that said Caleb Downs was going to make a decision. Honestly, I didn't know that was a big deal. That I had to tell people that, or I would have. But for the record, everybody's making a decision whether to stay or go. Everybody. That's exactly what's happening. They're meeting the coaching staff for the first time. Their old coaches left. Some of their teammates have left. So we always knew this would be the case. They would have to get to know the coaches. Are they comfortable? For some, it's just as simple as, shoot, I like this place. My girlfriend's here. I know where I know who makes the best burger. I'm a kind of guy that it wouldn't have mattered who was coaching. I would have been, when I got used to that area, it was over. It was over. There'd have been no ties. I'd have just been comfortable. I know where my apartment is. I know where I can get gas. I know it's open late to get a Mountain Dew and Skittles. So, other people kids on the team will be just as comfortable with that. Others are looking at a business decision or looking to go where they're more comfortable. Some might be homesick. There's a million little factors that play into this.
Yeah, speaking of business decisions, we were in the thick of the Travaris Robinson situation at this time a day ago. We now know that T-Rob will, in fact, stick with the University of Georgia and Kirby Smart. I guess there was some talk both ways. What exactly was the opportunity for T-Rob at Alabama moving forward? What is it going to be at Georgia? Do we have any more clarity on that situation a day later than we had 24 hours ago?
Not really. It happened all fast. Part of what laid the groundwork was that T-Rob and Nick Saban were trying to work on an extension, a new contract at Alabama. It never got done. Nick Saban retires. T-Rob had offers from other people, had to make a decision. Now, imagine once Kalen DeBoer was named, that Kirby, who had made him an offer, and I believe T-Rob had told him he was coming at the time, said, you got to make your decision. You got to make it quick. He didn't want to just sit here and wait on him, knowing that, I know how the coaching business works. Make your decision. He gave him whatever amount of days it was. And he met with Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer had been there mere hours since landing in Tuscaloosa. Didn't give him a solid answer what he wanted. Took the Georgia job the next morning. Alabama had talks with him again and never got worked out. But, at Georgia, he's a co-DC, but, Kirby Smart's the head coach and Glenn Schumann's the DC. You're the co-DC. They're a tag team since their time in Alabama. Glenn Schumann is one of the most, popular names mentioned when you talk about young coaches, even among college coaches and those kind of people that know each other. They talk about how smart he is. So eventually he's going to be lined up to get his job, just like Dan Lanning. So 33 years old. So maybe it's a play to be the future Georgia defensive coordinator. I'm not exactly sure, but Bama. All right. So tell me again, Charlie Potter's already told me, how do we say this name of the new defensive coordinator? Because Charlie sent me for a loop yesterday.
What
it was like Wommack.
Wommack is the way I say it.
No. Charlie blew my mind.
Wommack. Wommack.
Yes,
Okay.
it blew my mind.
I remember his dad coaching in the SEC.
Was like
shocked, and I thought even back then, I thought it was Dave Womack. I didn't think it was Womack.
Charlie said he texted I'm pretty sure it's WHMICK. And I said, man, I'm calling him Steve. I'm not.
Kane's a cool name, everybody. So you just go with Kane and Swarm D, because that's what he calls his defense.
I think that'll do it. I was just surprised when Charlie texted me. I said, man, you know how I am with names.
Well, if that's the case, I've been wrong on that family surname for about 25 years, because I was saying Kane's dad's name wrong. And so were some announcers. I could swear that his dad, when he was coaching at Arkansas and Ole Miss and Georgia Tech and some other places, I thought it was Dave Womack. But Kane,
You're not the only one. And
regardless.
I've talked to college coaches who've mentioned that. Now, a few did correct me, not correct me, but said it in a different way than I was used to. So it was kind of
Okay.
interesting. But
So not like pork chop Womack. It's Kane Wommack.
well,
Wow. That
yeah,
that did throw me for a loop too. Hey, but let's talk about Kane because he started to percolate around midday yesterday into the afternoon and evening hours. Give us kind of a layout on how that transpired. It seemed like he was a guy that maybe even Nick Saban had in his back pocket, but certainly familiarity there with Kane and Kalen. The Kane and Kalen show, maybe we can call it moving forward.
yeah. I think yesterday. I think you saw him finally, and we thought this would be the case, right? He had landed in Tuscaloosa Friday, met the staff, met the players. Saturday, the introduction. Sunday, finalizing his staff as far as who's coming from Washington, it seems like. And then Monday, we thought would be the best time to sit down and kind of iron this out. I think there was talk Saturday. Charlie Potter reported last night, Austin Armstrong, Carl Scott. There was other people talked to. But Wommack was the guy that came up pretty quickly. Name started popping up Sunday, but Monday it was full throttle with that, so been doing a little research, trying to figure out exactly what he does. The swarm defense and all is pretty interesting. I still like to do a little bit deeper dive, but I know you've dug into that.
Yeah, 425 is going to be the base. And I've already heard or read some Alabama fans with us there on the roundtable at BamaOnLine.com a little concerned in terms of how personnel will match up with scheme. I think Clint Lamb of our staff has now dropped a piece to sort of
Yeah.
make those. And look, Alabama's been playing a 425 almost essentially as its base for 5 or 6 years now. And so when you see a 425, and man, how are these Jack linebackers going to fit into a four-man front? Well, Jack linebacker is a hybrid defensive end outside linebacker. So Keon Keeley, Yanzi Pierre, Q Robinson, Keanu Coote, whichever of these guys you want to pull out of the hat, they're essentially going to be the equivalent of like a weak side defensive end in a 4-3 defense. You're still going to have a bigger defensive end like a Justin Aboigbe, in your base defense on early downs. Your two linebackers are going to be your Mike and your weak side linebacker, your 5 defensive backs, 2 corners, 2 safeties, and essentially the star, which is what Alabama's been running for a while now.
I'm most excited about the terminology. The bandit, wolf, sting,
Wolf.
husky.
Yeah.
Wolf, sting,
Yeah.
husky. I mean, you got a lot of things happening there. It's a lot of cool stuff to say. I always felt weird going Jack. He's a Jack. You know what I mean? That was always different. So terminology.
No cheetah, please. After
Yes,
2022.
Yeah, well, you have those guys, new terminology. Clint did a good job in the story, kind of breaking it down and seeing how do you fit in. The one thing about Alabama is that they've recruited for basically any personnel. You know what I mean? It's not like you can come in and you got to figure out where, Quay Russo is a classic example. He's a guy that's just an animal, and would not shock me at all to see him on the field next year. He's just built different. He thinks different. He acts different. I know we have a few posters will be extremely happy. They love some Quay. But yeah, I mean, you had that happening. You had a lot of the personnel groupings, a lot of the names that we're very familiar with. Denzel Duvall.
Off the field staff. Yeah.
Yeah, off the field, Jeff Allen.
Josh Chapman.
Ellis
David
Ponder.
Ballou.
Yeah. Ashley, can't think of her last name.
Kimbrough.
Yeah. There were big names. People were pretty excited about them. So we had all that coming in. And then out of the blue, had a call and tell me Ryan Williams was in Tuscaloosa and chased it down and confirmed it, that he showed up. And later that night, we saw him on social media with Jalen Mbakwe. And, of course, those two are extremely close. Ryan's just a personable guy. He's got friends all over the country. I mean, if you take him to North Korea, I bet he knows 2 people. He's been playing Fortnite or something with. So, but to get him on campus, I mean, because the biggest thing is what? Can he recruit? Does he know how to recruit? Can he recruit? Does he know how to recruit? So to get Ryan on campus a mere 100 hours into the job is pretty impressive. I mean, we haven't talked to Ryan yet, but supposed to be back for an official visit this weekend. There's a lot of, and we're going to get this asked a lot, obviously. There's still a lot at play here with Ryan. New staff, get to know it. But there's a lot of familiarity in Tuscaloosa for him. I mean, that guy has been there a lot. I mean, he's been there a lot, hanging out, spend the night, knows people on the team, knows people on campus. So obviously there's a long way to go in his recruitment. but they're having to rebuild that relationship they had before. Now, I will say, I think you'll agree that if you sit down and say, here's what I do with my wide receivers,
Yeah.
I think Kalen DeBoer is going to impress you. Because, I mean, I found a guy on Twitter that all he showed was Jamarcus Shepard's route running, the routes they run. And, man, it is impressive. It is impressive. They'll run you out. It'd be a mess to try. You give that quarterback time, it's going to be a mess trying to defend these guys.
Yeah, and what wide receivers, prospective wide receivers, like to see as much as anything, show me some numbers, right? In Rome and Dunzy, the Washington
Yeah.
wide receiver in 2023, 92 catches, 1,640 yards, and 13 touchdowns. And he wasn't the only guy. Jalen Polk, 15 games, 69 receptions, 1,159 yards, and 9 touchdowns. So, look, Alabama not transitioning to the triple option, as we've said. This is going to be a pro-style offense. And as we talked about yesterday with Clint Lamb on here as well, if you're a wide receiver anywhere, even at maybe an existing college program, a current college program, you're a high school wide receiver, you're a junior college wide receiver. Once you get a chance to really see this offense in this part of the country, and it's not exclusive to the Pacific Northwest. I mean, there's prolific passing offenses throughout the country. Alabama has certainly been on that list in recent years. You're going to like the production you're going to see from the wide receivers in the system. And oh, by the way, Ryan, Isaiah Bond has left for Texas. So there's a pretty wide open situation right now at the top of the rotation at Alabama.
Yeah, I think they know all that when they do the sales pitch. And if you look, technically, I think you would have to say like Auburn. Auburn has a really good wide receiver class. Like subtract Ryan, they've got an A+ wide receiver group. I mean, they got Cam Coleman, who's on the verge of being an alien. Perry, who's got the upside. They got 2 guys from the state. We don't even talk about the 2 4-stars they've got who are really good football players. So they've got it. Texas is going to have a quite the load. I don't think Texas A&M's in this. I really think it would be Bama and Auburn at the end of the day, which I think it's been the whole time. But, yeah, good to me, it's just a good sign. Regardless of the outcome, it's a good sign to get them on campus and kind of see how well, the staff's, doing their target list.
Yeah, Speed RTR here in the comments says the triple option catches too much hate. And Speed, I'm not hating on the triple option. If you followed me in any form or fashion over the years, I am a triple option lover. I love the triple option, but this offense is not going to be that. I don't think
I
there's
tell you
any
who
doubt about
hates
that.
it are defensive coordinators.
Oh, they do for sure.
They hate it. They despise it. Catching plenty of hate there.
Especially when you see it in like week 12 before you got a rivalry game against,
Sandwich
say, an
between Auburn
Auburn.
and sandwich between Auburn and
Let's
LSU.
mix in some triple option here, on
Who was that
November the
team
16th.
that Alabama faced back a while back? It was definitely between LSU and Auburn. Was it Georgia State? They beat Dre down the sideline on a tip pass. You remember that?
Todd now is going to be the smart guy in the chat. RPO is triple option. Yeah, I know, Todd. It is, but we're talking about academy style football, right? RPO is pretty much mainstream. You're right, though. There are triple options involved in it for sure. Georgia Southern. Here comes the Georgia Southern comments now from 2011. Hey, Tim, defensively, though, when you talk about rounding out the staff, now that you have your coordinator and you have Freddie Roach retained as a defensive line coach, obviously, you want some, you want the cohesiveness there from the coordinator on down. But that's got to carry over into recruiting too, because offensively, you went heavy with carryover from Washington. And if you're an Alabama fan, that's exactly what you wanted to happen. That's what you wanted Kalen DeBoer to bring with him from Seattle. But does there have to be more of a recruiting emphasis, you think, with these remaining hires?
I do. That doesn't necessarily mean Kalen DeBoer does. You know what I mean? I think he could feel comfortable where he's at, but I think they have set the base. I mean, there's a lot of guys and a lot of the pieces are in place already with having your DC. You have Freddie Roach, who's going to be like the local guy. He's the Alabama player who very heavily recruits the state. So you've got him, but also you got to have connections in Georgia. Gillespie's going to have connections in Georgia, definitely in Florida. Roach will have some, but you kind of leak on out into Mississippi, Louisiana, and all that good stuff.
I got you. So again, as we look at this still forming Alabama staff under Kalen DeBoer, You've got your coordinators in place. Now you're working through some positional areas on the defensive side of the ball. And, I think that could play into some of this portal stuff too. And also the potential that, Kalen DeBoer had some players at Washington that hit the portal, a couple of defensive backs, if I'm recalling correctly here too. So that portal can swing both ways. Say, if you have some corners or some defensive backs on the Alabama side that enter the portal, just college football 2024, I guess the best way to describe it. But some of these guys for Alabama, especially on defense, they're still trying to figure out who their position coach is going to be, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is and look, again, we get the fans and the panic at times and the anxiety and wanting to know the answer. I mean, literally, I posted last night, Ryan Williams is on campus. They're like, who's the DB coach? You know what I mean? Like, those things aren't even close to a correlation. I get they want answers, but all the answers aren't right now. If you watch, there's been a process. He gets on staff. He's hired, met with the team. He's had these dominoes fall, filled out his offensive staff, found his defensive coordinator on Monday. So I think you're going to see now the position interviews. And this is very similar to the process Nick Saban followed when he did that. He would do multiple interviews. I mean, it's a snow day in Alabama. We got some snow. I'm assuming Tuscaloosa's got bad weather. Our roads are closed. So it's really not a chance to get out and get on the road and see high schools unless they head to Mobile somehow. But they will be able to interview people, Zoom people for that position. And there's going to be interest in it. I mean, there's guys that want to – I mean, Alabama's always been a hot spot before Nick Saban and after, and certainly be after Nick Saban for assistant coaches.
What about some retention possibilities, maybe even on the defensive side of the ball? Is Robert Bala maybe in that mix, Tim?
He's the only one left.
I know there's a lot of love for Ha Clinton Dix, who has been in a support staff role, to maybe go on the field, former NFL player, big time player at Alabama, part of a couple of national championship teams. George Hilo was brought in during bowl prep. He has background with the outside linebackers. You've got veterans like Charlie Strong that have been on that support staff. I guess this could go any number of ways here down the stretch.
Well, I think that he's had, he could look back to his Indiana roots. I think you look at that. There's guys that were on that staff that didn't travel with him out west. He could look at, he's been around. He's been a lot of places. So I would guess he's did a lot of interviews. Also, I think when you have guys that have been staples with this program, as long as they have, a lot of his assistant coaches, they'll know people. So I don't think they're going to want for top talent. And also Wommack might have a strong feeling on everything he wants to bring.
Yeah, that's where it needs to start. And I know there is that quick trigger sort of reaction when there's change like this. And it's something Alabama fans are not accustomed to at all. We haven't talked like this since 2007, and we didn't talk like this because there wasn't even this platform for us to talk on, Tim. That's how long it's been. That's some perspective on this situation. The college football landscape, it's not even the same game in 2024, not even close to what it was 17, 18 years ago. So when you think about it in terms of making hires, again, you don't want to fall into that trap, right? Of being, hey, we've got to make this hire for this player. We got to make this hire to keep this player on the roster. You can't think that way.
No, you can't.
As painful as it might be on the short term, you can't do that.
And I agree with Paul here. I think that the positioning of where they're at, they were prepared for this. And I thought it'd be an absolute chaos. You know what I mean? I never expected. Now, the whole world had changed a little bit from 5 years ago when it sort of hit me at some point he was going to retire. But I will say this is about, we've said it several times. We said it every day. This is about the best position you could hope for 5 days after Nick Saban retired, in my opinion. We're 60 hours away from it being a full week. As Jimmy Stein pointed out last night on the message board, a week ago last night, Kalen DeBoer was coaching in the national championship game. So you've seen a lot of stuff happen and a lot of activity. And hey, before we go any further, we want y'all to do us a favor. We ask every show, please take 1 second, hit subscribe, hit like. Travis does a great job on this page. We put a lot of effort to it. Andrew, all of us coming on here, Joseph Hastings, Clint Lamb, Jimmy Stein, and who am I forgetting? Charlie Potter. We love this show. It's really growing. We never actually expected, I know me and Travis didn't, to love YouTube like we do, but we enjoy being out here able to voice and say exactly what we mean. So please take 1 second, hit link and subscribe. We appreciate it as always.
And Tim, not just in terms of transfer portal arrivals, perhaps from UW that played previously for Kalen DeBoer. I see here where Alabama recently offered under Kalen DeBoer a former UW commitment. So when we talk about the 4.25 and fit, and then I see a guy like Noah Carter, the Arizona Player of the Year for 2023, 6'4", 220 pounds, right? That's that jack outside linebacker measurables that we're used to seeing for Alabama at that position in terms of bringing guys in initially, the Chris Braswells, Dallas Turners, those type of guys. So we're already seeing at least some UW influence from Kalen DeBoer's time there with his staff and Courtney Morgan as general manager, and some new offers out and a potential addition maybe to this 2024 class for Alabama.
Yeah, and not only that, Andrew Bones got him scheduled for a tentative official visit. Now that's going to be having to put in motion really fast. Last night with everything going on, you had coaches, we had personnel, we had Ryan, we had all this stuff going on. And every now and then I'd look up and Joseph or Andrew would post Alabama offered somebody. So I wasn't really checking on it. I was like, what the – I thought they were just slinging out offers of guys they knew and all that stuff. I look up, it's George McIntyre. So I sort of like hit a blank, like, wait a minute. Like, it sort of hit me for a minute, like, what the hell is happening? But I realized they were going back to say, you do have an offer. We are interested, which I thought was good. But they were obviously spent time on the phone. We know they were hitting up kids and talking to them and trying to get them on campus. Supposed to have a couple junior days coming in here pretty quick. So just a lot going on.
You think about the craziness that you've pointed out here in terms of how the early signing day now, along with the portal being open essentially for all of December. And in a year's time, Tim, on January the 16th, we'll still be 4 days away from the national championship game. The national championship game next year's played on January the 20th, and the 12-team playoff starts on December 20th, 21st. So think about that coming into play with everything else. I guess if you had to go through a change, this may have actually been the year to do it, because if you're assuming Alabama's a 12-team playoff participant next year, it's going to be even more insane.
Every time I get a new piece of information, it kind of like it adds to my brain, my brain strain a little. Jimmy Stein texted me this morning and said, it's 62 days till the start of spring. I was like, dude, don't do that. Now my internal clock is kicking, kicking on the spring. I've got that TikTok going down on top of the portal window closing, signing day close, all that stuff. We got so much going on, but yeah, I mean, it's rather amazing. I still wake up kind of thinking like, how did we get here? You know what I mean? 4:00, boom, Nick Saban retires. Head coach the next day. We're going to at some point we need a timeline to figure out everything that happened. Just haven't had a chance to catch our breath at this point.
Yeah, it's going to be a minute too. I think before that opportunity presents itself. It's almost like the old 163 days till catchers and pitchers report, and you're like, oh, we got some things to cover.
It's a different world. I got snow in the middle of January in Alabama. So 29 is the high, and that's in the middle of Alabama, praying for all those people up north.
Yeah.
I don't even want to know what they're dealing with. All of our people in Nashville were on threes base. We have a lot of friends of the program up there. They had like 7-8 inches. I was getting videos yesterday of their snow. So everything's kind of out of whack, but I love it. I'm here for it.
Absolutely. And we're here for you on the YouTube home for BamaOnLine.com. As Tim said a few moments ago, if you haven't subscribed to our BOL YouTube channel, we certainly hope you'll do that right now. Hit that like button, turn on those notifications. You'll get all of our video content as it drops right here. Of course, BamaOnline.com is where it all starts. And our roundtable forum, our message board, there, our premium message board at BOL. That's where everything is going to drop first. Everything Alabama related, you're going to find us right there on the roundtable at BamaOnline.com. So, Tim, we've still got a mailbag to get into. We still have Alabama men's basketball with an opportunity to move to 4-0 in SEC play. That was a pretty damn gutty win in Starkville on Saturday night. Boy, what a week for Mark Sears, and really a season to this point. He's been on one.
I mean, if he's not in the discussion for All-American, I don't know who is. I mean, you got 22 points. I mean, look, that game's it's like a little bit of a WWE wrestling match. I mean, Pringle made it less than 5 minutes with 5 fouls. I mean, I didn't love some of the fouls. I'm going to be honest. I mean, he had 1 block. I don't think he had a rebound. I didn't love some of the foul. I thought but I kind of expected it. You know, Mississippi State's coming off the high, pounding Tennessee down low in the paint. Tennessee just couldn't stop their big man. We knew Alabama wasn't particularly strong in that area with the bigs. And, and again, Mississippi State, they're an old team. I mean, when I looked at some of the players on their team, we talk about football, but they had some guys that were grown up in age and had experience. But, yeah, Mark Sears, I mean, unbelievable clutch game. Ryland is sneaking up. I'm having to point it out to a few of my buddies. Ryland is slowly but surely sneaking up every game in that double-digit range. And Wrightsdale with huge, obviously. But I thought all the bigs battled, and that wasn't as easy as it sounded. They had limited minutes, had to rotate them in and out. Fouls were called easily. Mississippi State's a very physical team. And again, they were riding that high of having just beat Tennessee. So
I thought Grant Nelson to me was admirable for what he at least tried to do in the paint against Tulu Smith, because Tulu Smith, when you want to just talk about pure post players in the Southeastern Conference, that's about as tough as it gets, tough of a matchup for this Alabama team. That's where you miss a Charles Bediako, especially.
Yes.
But, free throws matter too. And Mississippi State struggled. Alabama, I believe, was plus 8 or 9 from the free throw line. You win by 8. Those add up pretty good for you if you're the Alabama Crimson Tide. Again, Mizzou set to visit Coleman Coliseum. That's a 6 p.m. Central tip. That game will air on the SEC network, and then it gets real, as we talked about, Tim. Tennessee and Auburn on the immediate horizon post Mizzou.
Yeah, both really good teams, but so far we've seen what Alabama really needed to do. Coming off that 3-game losing streak of Purdue, Creighton, and Arizona, and then putting together 5 or 6 games. Missouri, they're double-digit favorites. They need to be focused and hold serve, because you're right. Then they go to Tennessee, which is going to be, despite the loss, they're a physical team. They're a talented team. They're going to be an irritated team that they've lost. And so Alabama's definitely going to have to battle in Knoxville, and then Auburn. We know what that means. I mean, that's the Alabama-Auburn game. Bruce Pearl comes to town. A lot of new Bruce and Nate Oates are perfect for each other, theatrical. I think there's a lot of respect between the two programs, but it's a very fierce rivalry. So I'd expect a fist fight. Then after that, you get to LSU, Georgia, Mississippi State again. So you get a little bit of reprieve, but you're in the SEC. There's not a whole lot of breaks like you might hope for.
No, there are not. It certainly ramps up after Mizzou. Mizzou struggling coming into this one, 0-3 in the league, 8-8 overall. So again, a prime opportunity for Alabama to do what it really needed to do. And it's still not an easy thing to do, because a couple of these games have been on the road. Say what you want about Vanderbilt, but another win in Starkville, that's never a bad thing for Alabama men's hoops. Hey, let's talk about a little bit of a rough stretch here for some Alabama alums. Alabama quarterbacks, specifically in the NFL playoffs, Tim. Not what any of us hoped for, where Tua Tagovailoa, although that shouldn't have come as a surprise for Miami, playing in those conditions Saturday night in Kansas City. I think we all saw that coming. Plus, Dolphins, so many injuries. And then kind of a similar thing for the Eagles last night down in Tampa Bay for Jalen Hurts. That Eagles team last night, they hung in there okay, but they got down early. Just didn't seem to have the kind of energy you would expect. Kind of looked like my Jags. And both those teams, the Jags and the Eagles, lost 5 of 6 down the stretch of the regular season.
Yeah, the Eagles just hit a wall. And I mean, you saw it. And even, a couple of their wins were really painful. But I don't know how you explain that downfall. I mean, really bad game from Tua. I mean, those elements. I was actually thinking the Dolphins were due a big game, and I was wrong. I mean, that weather was that ball's catching them in the air. They couldn't really do much. But the Eagles were the ones we expected to do better, right? We had a lot of hype. Jalen had MVP hype coming into the season. They had talent. Smitty's still Smitty, right? I mean, he's still
Smitty was
Smitty.
great
Don't care how
last
he
night.
don't care how y'all playing. He knows how he's
He's like,
playing. So
no AJ Brown, no problem. I'm a
no
number one in
problem.
this
Yeah,
league.
no problem. But I do think they had major issues. Nothing seemed right. The play calling, the execution, that just was not a very good football team. So not very surprised.
What about Nick Sirianni for the Eagles? Boy, you talk about going from hot young NFL genius to maybe out. I mean, you
Well,
saw some of the shots.
That happened last time with the Eagles,
Yeah.
right? Go for
Yeah.
2, never kick an extra point, never punt, you're fired. You know, you remember that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dougie
So
P.
I mean, you live on that edge. They love you when you're hot, but they're kicking you in the ribs when you're down. But how about Baker Mayfield? what are the odds Baker's living this dream life in Tampa after everything he's been through? So played a good football game against a decent defense. So you gotta give him some props. But I did not have that on my bingo card of the Baker comeback.
Have Tua and Jalen hit their respective NFL ceilings, in your opinion, Tim? And if they have, is that going to be good enough for the big picture when you talk about championships and those type of things? When I look at Tua right now, it saddens me in a way, in a big way, because I think the hip injury shows up because he just can't seem, not that he was ever Lamar Jackson before the injury, but Tua could he could navigate well. You know, he had the touchdown run at LSU that comes to mind on an extended play. That's just not that guy that I see right now. And then for Jalen, there are stretches where you start thinking about that first half against Georgia, too. Now, I'm cautious about that because early in Lamar Jackson's career, it kind of felt that way. And now he's caught another window where the Ravens might, win a couple of championships here coming up. So I guess I got to be a little more patient maybe with Jalen
No,
especially.
I think that like it remains to be seen. I think the early season hype on both these teams didn't help. I mean, they both had really good records early on. They were doing well. I think the Dolphins kind of have to have a reset. I mean, I think there's a kind of, the head coach is a comedian. You know what I mean? And there's another one. You go from Caprice to would you like the biggie size of that fry pretty quick in the National Football League? A lot of people consider them a gimmick type, but they've got talent. They got Tyreek, they got Waddle, they got Tua. Offensive line didn't do a great job. I still think Miami's got more in the tank with some adjustments. They've got really good defensive tackles, but there's definitely some changes. The Eagles, I can't understand. I agree with Donald. They folded the tent. Donald Andrews said the Eagles folded the tent. I don't understand it. I couldn't understand it either. Why they just couldn't get right down the stretch. Like they looked bad. It wasn't just they lost. Last night they looked terrible.
They didn't even want to be there. And it's the playoffs to channel Jim Morris Sr. The playoffs, Tim. And they looked like my Jags in Nashville a couple of weeks ago when the Jags had everything on the line. That was a playoff game that they needed to win in Nashville to actually make the playoffs. Bad. And they didn't even show up. And that's what the Eagles looked like last night. That was an indictment of a coaching staff in a lot of ways.
And that's a successful program. I mean, franchise. Those are winners on that field. A lot of those kids. I mean, Jalen Carter, Devonta Smith, Jalen Hurts. I mean, you got a lot of Georgia players. You got a lot of Alabama players. It's not like those guys aren't used to winning and competitive, So, again, the Eagles even were gifted perhaps the number 1 or 2 player in the draft when Jalen Carter had the off the field issues and fell to 10th. I mean, nobody expected that pre-draft, so they actually got a break there and did just something. That's how it is, though. Something's not right. You get in that locker room, something's wrong, it feels wrong, and it just takes off. And I think they're looking for, a lot of answers this
Tim,
offseason.
I'm getting blown up here in the chat about Mason Short. I'm sure you've just seen that, perhaps. The 2025 interior offensive lineman from Evans, Georgia, had been committed to Alabama for the 2025 cycle. He joins Jamie French now, the wide receiver from Jacksonville, Florida, in however you want to phrase it, decommitting from Alabama, reopening their recruitment. I guess this is sort of in line what we're seeing with some of the existing players in the transfer portal, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's 25. I mean, I could not have less worries than 2025 right now, simply because they're down the totem pole behind your current roster, the 24, the ones you just got on campus. That's no offense to them. I mean, this is just a smart business move. You don't know them. This is like a mail order bride to some degree. Your parents done shipped you off to ship you, somebody you don't know, you're not familiar with. So that makes sense. And let's be clear, the 2020 guys that commit that early often take visits. They often, and Mason Short's been to Georgia, 4 or 5 times this year. So it wasn't like he was just sitting at home waiting on Alabama home game. So not surprising. It's not surprising at all. I would expect a lot of the younger guys recruiting process. And hey, you know what's going to shock some people? Every commitment might not be what Kalen DeBoer and his staff are looking for. We've seen a change of pace. You brought up a great point. This has nothing to do with Mason, just in general. But Washington's offensive linemen were considerably smaller than what Alabama put on there. So they might seek out a smaller or different type offensive lineman. That just remains to be seen. But it was a popular trend for a while to get these smaller guys like Eric Fisher. A lot of the guys in the NFL that win the first round, Charles Power, we have him on here. He'd talk about it for an hour. But you have guys that recruited to college as tight end who gain weight, and then the next thing you know, they're a left tackle. So there's different philosophies to recruiting those offensive linemen.
Yeah, I remember the Broncos kind of being that way a decade or so ago with Terrell Davis. Remember that run game that they
Oh,
had?
yeah.
Schlerick and those guys on that offensive line, they weren't like the hogs of the Washington teams of, say, the 80s with John Riggins. I know I'm dating myself severely at this point, but just to try to draw a few analogies there to how different offenses employ different offense run game schemes, pass protections, what they want their linemen to be able to do, pull, get in space, different things. And I'll say this, with Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb, you're going to see a very diverse run game. This isn't going to be a couple of years ago when some of us were just begging for an end around, just anything other than outside zone. You're going to get a wide variety, not just in terms of how Alabama throws the football, but how Alabama runs it as well. So Tim says, just be patient. The emphasis right
I
now
just think
is on
I just think
2024 and your roster, which makes total
Yeah,
sense.
and I just think it makes sense for Mason Short or whoever to take a visit. And
Sure.
again, remember, this is a two-way road. Don't forget how Michael Penix, his career went. He was a guy committed to Tennessee. The new staff wasn't comfortable with him. They went and got their own guy. Went to Indiana. It's funny though. This is in the championship. On a side note, everybody was like, Tennessee Pruitt passed on this guy. Nobody cared when he went to Indiana. Now, flash forward a few years, he's a Heisman candidate. But my point is basically, you get a guy and the coaching staff's going to have a type. We said that about a guy like Eric Wolford. He had a type, big, strong, heavy offensive lineman. These coaches are going to have a type and a guy they prefer as well.
No doubt about it. Hey, Tim, let's head into the T. Watson TR mailbag on this Tuesday morning. And speaking of OLs, we'll get it going with Jake Hartline 25 in the mailbag. Asks the Washington center in the portal, any chance Bama picks him up? And that is a player that I sort of referenced in talking about some of the differences where size is concerned between what Washington fielded offensively in 2023 and the massive front that we saw from Alabama. Parker Brailsford is the offensive lineman that Jake is referring to here. And Parker Brailsford, at least according to the Washington roster anyway, on the official UW website, checks in at 6'2", 275 pounds. Now that's pushing it a little bit in today's game, and especially in the SEC, because you're talking about a different type of defensive lineman in the Southeastern Conference than you were, say, the Pac-12 as it was known before it went through extinction here of late. But who knows? Maybe it could be a guy that they look at. But we talked about this too, Tim, in relation to some current Alabama linemen at the center position. James Brockermeyer, a veteran that's been around, he's kind of in that size range, not a 320-pound player at all. And some different things you might be able to do with Rock Montgomery. It just sort of remains to be seen, I guess, again. And I'm not saying that that Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb aren't in favor of being 330 across the front? They might be, because you know what? At Fresno State and even at Washington, they have never been as big, strong, and fast as they're about to be, Tim.
Yeah, I think it comes down to your options, right? I think
Yeah.
you look at what you've got on campus and see what your options are. And again, this is just one of those to be determined. It is one of my favorite things about the website is that a minute somebody hits the portal or decommits, he could be from Anchorage, Alaska, and they want to know if Alabama's got a shot. This one makes sense because of the Washington connection for sure. And as the situation falls, you've got Seth gone to Ohio State. So very interesting. This makes sure. But I do love that no matter who hits the portal, they want to know instantly, usually, if we got a chance. But this does make sense. This is a bad example, but usually it could be anybody.
Yeah. Tidy Whitey in the mailbag asks, how much do a coach's SEC connections actually impact recruiting? In my mind, success, or NIL money in parentheses, is what would attract recruits. What is the connection component, and just how important is it? Obviously, in relation to Kalen DeBoer and at least half of the staff or so coming from the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, I think relationships matter. I mean, I think I don't think it's ever just going to come down to a business transaction. I still think if a player, look at it this way. If a player has X amount of dollars from 5 schools, what's going to help him decide between those 5 schools? Because it's basically all even. If they're all in the ballpark, it's going to come down to relationships, opportunity to play, proximity to home, his position coach, his coordinator, his head coach. So SEC connections absolutely matter. Now, if you're full NIL, and Miami's did this to some degree, Miami recruits, we've been told, positional instead of area. That takes out a lot of the relationships because you are going just trying to work a business transaction. But what if you get a guy who's not about just the NIL? What if there's more to that guy? You very well could just lose him. And we know people have been turned off by the NIL discussion too. It's a fine line on how to handle all of this.
Stu_Hart here in the roundtable mailbag wants to know, Tim, is Thunderstruck hitting the transfer portal? Will Alabama's intro music from the Nick Saban era perhaps move on with the legendary coach? You got a coach coming in from Seattle, so maybe some grunge, Tim, or maybe Thunderstruck sticks around.
Kurt Cobain?
Little Smells Like Teen Spirit, maybe.
Hey.
How about some Hunger Strike? From
for
Temple of the Dog.
Guys, that would be it. Yeah. I don't know.
I don't mind stealing bread from the mouths of decadence.
I think that walkout music, just like in baseball, you just come out to what you're used to. You know what I mean? So the coaches are.
I think you bring
players.
Back the Sea Murder. Bring back the Sea Murder. That used to get.
Thunderstruck is just an amazing song, and you've seen it in anything with sports, and you've seen Thunderstruck. It's used brilliantly in Varsity Blues at their practice scene. So you can't go wrong with it.
I like Big Pimpin'. How about that for your come out music? That'd be pretty good. I mean, I know that's a little dated, but something like that. Hey, we got a couple of questions in here, Tim, in relation to the defensive coordinator. That was from yesterday. So there you go. Remember Lee's Tomb checking in here in the roundtable mailbag with reports of frustration from coaches and administrators across the country as it relates to NIL and the portal. It seems that no one really has a blueprint of the best way to navigate this new system. Agreed on that. Remember Lee's. Now that Saban is no longer coaching, I wonder if this would be a perfect area for his focus. Could you see him in a GM type role within the athletic department where he potentially revolutionized that side of the sport the same way he created the blueprint for the modern football program? What do you think? Can you envision a scenario where something that didn't strike Nick Saban particularly well in terms of NIL could be something that he really sinks his teeth into, Tim? I don't necessarily envision that, but maybe you do.
No, I don't. I mean, you don't retire. That's worse than coaching, trying to fix this where we're at. I can see like a middle ground of a panel and people seeking advice. Look, you're a fool not to talk to guys that have been around this game that long. And I'd include Urban Meyer in that. Anybody, Pete Carroll, even though he's those are guys right there. Those are football guys that kind of understands the NFL. I mean, all three. What have Pete Carroll, Nick Saban, and Urban Meyer got in common? They won national championship on the college level, and they've been NFL coaches. So they're going to have a little bit of understanding there. I can see him on a panel, but, I would think that his retirement's pretty much retirement from that. I think he'll probably end up doing some ESPN game day, some responsibilities in Tuscaloosa, maybe help with the NIL at Alabama, which would be a little bit ironic, but probably needed. Those kind of things. I can't see him taking on a full-time job. I could be wrong, but that doesn't sound like retirement to me. That sounds like a bunch of people arguing. Because, hey, there's going to be people that don't want regulation on this. Let's be clear. There's going to be people who've basically got unlimited pockets. They don't want it to be regulated. That defeats their purpose. So
I see Nick Saban as a mega ambassador, and not just for Alabama football either. I mean, he can still impact things tremendously from the athletic department standpoint and the university in general, right? I think if his office is in fact at Bryant-Denny Stadium, it's almost appropriate that it's closer to the Rose Administrative Building where the president of the university has an office than, say, even the Malmore complex. I think he can have that type of impact as an ambassador, chief ambassador type.
But a man who loves to golf, a man who's got more money he can ever spend, a man who owns a lake house and a beach house. If he does, I'll be super impressed. And I will say,
no, I'm not saying on a full-time basis.
No. I'm just talking in general.
As needed. But I don't see him. I don't see him punching the clock or anything like that.
I don't see anybody going, why is Nick Saban not here at 9 a.m.? Yeah.
Banker's hours, Nick? Say because I own the bank.
Did Saban use PTO? Look that up. I don't think we're shooting down that road just yet.
Not quite yet. I don't think so either. Thrill 2K1, our guy here in the Roundtable Mailbag, Tim. All he wants us to do is to tell him that Caleb Downs is staying at the University of Alabama. That's all he wants. That's all he needs.
The only ones I know who are staying. Look, I went into this thinking anybody could leave. And I meant any single person on that team could leave. And I still feel that way unless they said they're staying. Now, the one thing that's really important for people to remember, so important, is that just because they don't say they're staying doesn't mean they're not staying. So all these kids aren't going to.
Some guys don't need a graphic. Yeah, they don't need a graphic.
You know what I mean? It's like go back to Najee, who never told anybody he was coming back, even though he knew he was coming back. He just shows up with the backpack, a door backpack, going to class, out of the blue. So these are not, these are still, they're not kids per se. Under 18, but they are very young adults who aren't always, up to date with, keeping up everybody with their every move. If they know, it's often good enough. But, Caleb remains to be seen. I know that tweet got everybody shook. It's so detailed. He's making a decision. I had no idea he had to make a decision. That was a news flash.
Yeah. I think Shots 22 here in the mailbag has a pretty undervalued response to this Thunderstruck question that we got just a minute ago from Stu Hart. Of course, Stu asked if Thunderstruck was going to hit the transfer portal. Shots 22 with the response, yeah, how much is UGA throwing at it? Geez. The replication. That's pretty good, Shots. That's not bad.
It's a good shot.
Now, Bama ZB, I guess he's asking about True Detective, which I know is
we're on thin ice, sir. I don't know how much to discuss it.
And I'm not, and I don't want to because I'm halfway through that episode. I'm only halfway through episode 1, and she is asking.
He just ruined it for Travis. Good work, Zach. Good work, buddy. Thank you.
I don't
need to watch it.
No, see, here's the good thing. Here's the good thing about me and these type of shows like True Detective. I'm so mentally lazy when it comes to my television and show consumption. I don't really want to even put much thought into it. And so it'll probably go right over my head anyway.
I think with this show, you're going to have to, and I had to watch it. I'm going to go back and watch it again because I had to watch it in 3 pieces because stuff kept popping up on the site and everything. So we'll see at the end. We're going to have a discussion for our buddy ZB at the end where we clearly state no spoiler alerts. Do not come in here if you haven't seen it. And we're going to break it down. But overall, I love the first episode.
I'll go out on a limb because I like the hot take stuff that I'm not smart enough to figure out even at the end of the season. But from episode 1, I'll go ahead, Tim, and say the lady that broke the guy's nose with the crab bucket or whatever, she's involved somehow in all this. I'm gonna go ahead. That's gonna be my hot take right from the start.
That's not a hot take for the record. For
I,
y'all
I
that haven't
won't.
seen the first one.
I won't be. I won't be right. But
Travis
Dubs
just said,
5.
go ahead.
Dubs 5 here in the mailbag says white helmets are so back, baby. We need a confirmation of this. That's always a great stir, isn't it? Nothing gets the Alabama fans going like, well, a change with a legendary coach, and then the potential maybe for the new coach to come in and change up the uniforms.
You
Oh,
know what used to piss them off? Have their hair on fire, ready to meet and fight like in Anchorman was Pepsi and Coke. They would discuss the concessions at Bama, and when I'd look up, I'd see the thread started innocently enough, and then I'd come back, and there was lives being threatened. Now, I will say I just wanted Mountain Dew. I didn't really care about the rest.
I think a lot of that has always stemmed from people who make their own drinks at the game. And so, like, if you're a Jack Daniels and Coke person, you don't want Jack and Pepsi, Tim. If you're going to make the effort to take that pint of Jack Daniels and put it somewhere uncomfortable so you can get it into the game, you want that Coca-Cola for that Jack and Coke. It's not Jack and Pepsi. It's Jack and Coke. I think that's probably where a lot of that stems from, is actually mixed drinks. Once people get into the I got all kinds of conspiracy theories today, don't I? But the white helmets thing, boy. You know what? For the record, and I know that was more of a Ray Perkins thing going way back. I didn't mind the white helmets, Tim. I didn't mind the white helmets. I didn't mind the all white helmets, white pants and jerseys. I'm not saying it needs to happen, but it was
made
still
a lot
within
of enemies. I'm just letting you know you made a lot of enemies just now.
But it was still within the concept of the traditional uniform at Alabama. It wasn't like they were.
I like the simplicity, and I know what you're saying, but I kind of like when I think of Alabama, I think of the traditional uniform, and there's not many of them. You've got who's left? USC, Texas, Michigan. I mean, everybody's starting to branch off into new divisions. Oregon, obviously.
Who's the one school who messes with their uniforms that absolutely should not, in your opinion? Because I've got a strong opinion.
I think Oregon could narrow it down to 3 and rock and roll, but 8 a year. Penn State, you are what you are. You know what I mean? If you do,
I respect it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm not judging at all. You are what you are. That stands for, if you did anything different, it would blow it up. But I think Oregon does a lot. You know, Tennessee's very busy sometimes with theirs. I still don't know about the Tennessee gray uniforms.
I think LSU messes with theirs too much. I don't think those uniforms need to be touched. I think LSU and Alabama could actually just wear one uniform set for every game, and not even need to wear the road or home alternative. For LSU, the white with the yellow pants and the yellow helmet, and for Alabama, white jersey, white pants, crimson helmet. I think they could both wear just one uniform every game, home or away, and not even need another uniform. And I thought Oregon in the bowl game against Liberty out at the Fiesta, did you see those sort of retros? That I thought that's the uniform Oregon ought to wear, those retros.
Yeah, but, Oregon they have so many uniforms. They have 3, maybe 4 in the rotation that I really like, and then they have 3 or 4. They have more than 3 or 4. Anything but 3 or 4 that are boo-boo kitty.
Already seeing in the comments, people are not happy about the talk of any potential changes to the uniform. And for the record, I'm totally good with not messing with what has been in place 99% of the time of recent, at least, Alabama football history. Dubs 5 also here in the mailbag. He's going back to True Detective, Tim. He asks, also, do you think the computer-generated elk in True Detective 4 episode 1 was a little much? And why did they jump? Was that a sign that Alabama's defense is about to jump off a cliff? Hey, that's connecting a few dots there, Tim.
Yeah. It's a lot happening there, right?
That's a lot happening there. I thought it looked like, it made me think of some reindeer that lost their mind or something, but That was an interesting open, I guess we would say, to True Detective season 4.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're always going to put it out and think. I think the thing that one did was it left us with so much anticipation for what everything meant. And if you look at it, I mean, the thing about True Detective 1, you know why I watch it every year? I've probably seen it 25 times, no lie, start to finish. We just watched it last week. I don't have half the answers. I don't know half the answers. I don't know if that was the end of the weird little group of guy people. I don't know if that that one guy, if that was it. They didn't explain. I mean, you look at the True Detective 1. What the hell was that fort he was living in? Oh, dude's
Yeah.
broke as a joke, cutting grass for a living in a fort, that had to come from some point in history, maybe going back, in Louisiana, the French occupied it. I mean, there's a story there we never got to tell. So I do think that's the beauty of True Detective. And I would expect a good season. 3 ended kind of that way. Don't know about 2, but 4, I think we're not supposed to know all the answers. A lot of that we're supposed to interpret on ourselves, which is going to frustrate some people, but I like it.
But Paul, here in the roundtable mailbag, but Paul, I think I got it right that time. Nick Saban, he says, ran a tight ship when it came to media availability for his staff. How's the flow of information different under Coach DeBoer versus Coach Saban? Are there any immediately noticeable differences as far as how he and his staff may communicate with media that you two are looking forward to? I haven't really dug into that yet, Tim. As far as with Nick, you knew you were getting the coordinators and assistant coaches once, twice, maybe 3 times a year, depending on the college football playoff, those type of things. If it was up to Nick, you were going to get the coordinators at the start of fall camp, and that was pretty much going to be it. Now, when Alabama would advance to, say, the college football playoff or maybe a bowl game of some kind, you would have more accessibility to coordinators and or assistants and really players in general. Freshmen have been off limits under Nick Saban. I'm not totally sure of the answer to that. And it is a different dynamic, really, just in terms of structure too,
I'll tell you
because
what, it won't be less access.
no, and I
I
think
mean, you had the head coach talking, no assistants really talking. Practice. Nick's. Nobody was glad to see COVID, but when COVID hit, Nick Saban could keep us off that practice field. I don't think it hurt his feelings at all. And they do a great job of sending out videos and photos and all, but it's not the same as being there for a 15-minute window. Travis used to go and film video. Potter was always there with observations. We had a lot of stuff.
instant analysis. Yeah,
yes.
we had
So
for
it
practice.
can't, and of course, COVID changed a lot of things, but it can't be less than that. I don't know many coaches who don't let their assistants talk. I think that's an old school thing with Nick Saban. I would expect we'd hear more from them. I think there'll be a set schedule. And this is me. Don't know the exact answers until he says it, but I feel like there'll be more access from that standpoint. And hopefully practice access. I mean, it's not practice access is a little bit overrated. Access is a little bit overrated because he's not in there putting hey, the media's here. Let's show what we're going to do on 4th and 2 if we get in that situation. What it is for us and for the fans, it's a chance to watch Quay Russaw run around in practice, which we have like last year. You'd have given a lot to see Keon Keeley and these guys make football plays and just what they can do for the future.
Yeah, it's
Tia
Tia
saying let the fan, yes.
Should keep.
Hey, Tia, the thing about it is you can limit the access. That won't stop the fake flow of news for a lot of people, though. The access isn't there. We just got stuff.
People get imaginative.
I mean, we're still not a week away from Dan Lanning being in Tuscaloosa. 2 hours after Nick Saban.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes, look, every job's not the same either. You might have had things wide open at Washington because at Washington, you needed the fan interest, right? You needed to do different things to try to keep the fans engaged and really into the program. This ain't Washington.
No.
So,
no. Hey, you know what? That's a good point. I should mention that. When Washington State staff came, Mike Price, and all hell broke loose with that situation. After the Mike Price situation was ironed out, some of the assistants told me, like, we didn't know it was a big deal to go like to the bar and hang out and drink, because in Spokane it wasn't. They just never thought about it. After
The
work they would
Palouse,
go and sit. Yeah, they would go and sit down
Pullman.
and have a beer. In a
Yeah.
town that small, there's not a whole lot of drinking holes. So students would be there. The students would say, hey, and all that. They never thought it was a big deal until it was a big deal. You know what I mean? Here, we're catching you at the airport. We know your golf score and all that kind of stuff. So I think there is going to be an adjustment from that standpoint, but I do think they've got enough people around them. And again, that's where Nick Saban's probably going to come in to help, that kind of advice he can give.
Even in Tuscaloosa, it's one thing to go out and maybe have a drink. I wouldn't recommend it for a head coach, especially of the football team. But it's another thing to actually get up on the bar. It kind of needs to be limited to at the bar. You can be at the bar maybe. On the bar,
well, I think their point was
not
more
what you want to do.
I think their point was more nobody made a big deal when they saw us, like taking photos and all that kind of stuff.
Here's a special.
They did get that. No, Nathan. Nathan was landing really in Tuscaloosa. I was under the impression he was never considered. No, he was never there.
Tim,
there were several reports.
I heard Lanning was at the Bolero on McFarland, is what I heard. You're contradicting that now.
It's at the Taco Casa.
Is it the Taco Casa?
No, Nathan, we're just kidding around about how many rumors there was when during the coaching search, especially the first night. So no, Dan Lanning.
We don't have to go there. I was just having some fun with Tim.
I think DeBoer was the number one target for the record.
There you go.
I think that was Greg Burns' guy, the most realistic guy he could get.
Greg Burns had receipts too. I mean, he had the plane in Seattle on Thursday, right after the retirement of Nick Saban the previous day. Major Wood 482. Now, this is the stuff I like in the mailbag. Go to comfort food and or drink for cold nights. Wind chill up here in Michigan was -20, and the wife cooked some chili and Mexican cornbread. It just hits different when it's cold outside. That's hard to go against, Major Wood. The chili with the cornbread on a night like that. Yeah.
That's a 5-star wife.
I like Italian food any time of the year, but a good lasagna, Tim, with some bread, some toasted bread, maybe. Boy, hard to go wrong with any of that. When it's really cold, I try not to drink as much of the brown water as I used to, Tim, Major Wood. I try to drink a little more red wine than I used to, but it's hard to beat a really good bourbon on a cold, cold night too. OnlyFans checking in here, Tim. As far as the South Alabama coach coming in as the DC, would this signal an end to roster retention, meaning exodus would ensue? I can hardly read this. Hoping not. So I guess what we're saying here, we don't envision a mass exodus with the new defensive coordinator hire.
No, I don't. Go ahead.
Bama 116. How do you think the new OC will do as a recruiter? We've talked about this in the past, Tim, and you have for sure, just what's expected of coordinators, right? From a recruiting perspective. Have you heard anything about how that might work with Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb?
No, not yet. I mean, the only thing I've been told is I've heard this consistently, is that they are the best head coach, offensive coordinator duo in the country. I'm kind of surprised Grubb didn't even get a look. I mean, it makes sense. A new AD wants to go his own direction. Also, I think, we're applauding Alabama. I think it's an A coaching search. I think Washington had an A coaching search, right? I mean, they just go and steal Fisher from Arizona, who had a good year. But no, I'm not sure how that's going to work. I mean, when you're a head coach, responsibilities are a lot more than just whatever your strength is, offensive or defensive coordinator. For Nick Saban or Kirby Smart, they didn't just focus on defense. They probably helped him put the install in or threw some ideas out, but they're going to spend a lot of time on doing all the other little stuff that a head coach has to do.
I Dinkins here in the mailbag asks, obviously there are names like Caleb Downs and Justice Haynes, but who is an underrated player that you feel is critical for Kalen DeBoer to keep? You got an underrated player that you think is critical for this football team moving forward?
I tell you, two that I bookmarked as perhaps as critical as anybody. Have already said they were coming back or hinted they were coming back, but I had Tyler Booker and Jaden Roberts. I think you get those interior guys with the way they pull, with the way they move fast. And we've seen both of them do that, clear space, the tunnel stuff they do, the short screens and everything they do, where they have to get out. I think those two are going to be as big as anybody in the country because it's hard. I still don't think we've understood how good Jaden Roberts was. I mean, I know we've talked about him a lot, but man, he put up almost an All-American type performance last year, and to get both those guys in for your interior, that to me was a huge deal. I don't know if they're underranked or undervalued. I really don't know if there's anybody. I wouldn't want to lose Burnip. That would be one I think you really want to keep. I mean, that guy can flip the field for you. Nobody talks about the punters, but I thought he had a fantastic year. Him and Will were great, in my opinion.
There's been a lot of talk because Amari Nyblack has hit the portal and is exploring his options. But I think bringing back those two tight ends and understanding that perhaps we won't see as much 12 personnel in this new offense that we saw from the previous group, but getting CJ Dupree, Robbie Oots back at that tight end position to give you some thump when you do want to run the football and you can throw it to these guys to go along with Caleb Odom coming in as a tight end. I think that's big. Danny Lewis expected, I guess, to still be in that tight end room. Ty Lockwood. I think the tight end position, because we talk so much about the wide receivers and the skill players in general in offense, maybe we haven't given those guys enough love either.
And I certainly don't think you can sleep on Caleb Odom, as a guy that could come in, it's that stretch, and, he can play all over the field for you. I agree with Jay Lindsey, kind of like a more athletic, better pass catching Robbie Oots. And Robbie Oots had a good year, in my opinion. Thought he caught a couple of tough balls. He had some really good passes on a lot of plays. And CJ Dupree still has a chance to break out. I mean, he's a guy that we saw flashes of used in the right system. So yeah, I agree with you. I'm surprised, still surprised Amari hit the portal that easy, and I'm not sure if he comes back or not. But I felt like if you looked at the one thing I thought jumped out to me first was like, if you're a tight end, my goodness, you're excited about this offense. So I think that's why Amari surprised me the most.
Tide Steel here in the mailbag. What's harder, figuring out where a 17 to 18-year-old is going to play ball or figuring out who's going to be the coach of the Alabama defense? Where do you go with that one, Tim?
Oh, the kids. I mean, I've got kids that age. I have no clue where they're at right now.
I don't know where mine are going for lunch. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea. I hope the mom, my wife knows where they're at. I have no idea. And also, I mean, it's, I was a 17 and 18-year-old, and I did things I didn't even know I was going to do. I was unpredictable to myself. So definitely 17 or 18-year-old. And then he said, how much did we drink? How much did we drive y'all to drink, smoke, and cuss the last few days? I mean, I cuss. It's just part of my language.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, my cuss is just, I use it to stress a point. I don't use it as a necessarily anger. I have an affinity for the F-bombs, but they're very descriptive. So y'all haven't did that. Travis probably drank a little more. Too cold to smoke.
A little bit of red wine. Yeah.
We've been through this before, though. Let's be clear. Me and Travis, we've sat through this. Andrew sat through this. A little bit different for Joseph, Clint, and Jimmy, maybe, as far as, handling the message board, flying, but they do great. I mean, it's, if you're a Bama fan, you're just excited, just as excited to work on this site as you are to, follow along, and everybody's played a part in figuring something out.
Yeah, Tide Still also says, thanks for all you both and the whole BOL staff do. I really appreciate all of you. Trust me, Tide Steele, we appreciate you even more, and we appreciate you and everyone else for joining us there at BamaOnLine.com. Since Forever is asking me if I can give him a hug here. Sure, air hug. That'll help you get through this process. Russ Lockridge here. Are you surprised, Tim, that none of the 24 signees have explored their options in the portal as of yet? That certainly can change, but you would think they would take a look because these guys committed to Saban. Any truth to Auburn talking to Mbakwe?
Mbakwe said he's good. I'm not sure where. I mean, look, Twitter, it's going to shock some people. That's not always an honest platform. I'm just letting y'all know we've seen.
Tim, you're kidding me.
I mean, hey, here's my hot take for the day. This is my hot take. We see guys, just so you know, that'll post stuff on Twitter on a message board, get Alabama fan. And this is for every fan base. Get a fan base riled up and then brag about it on their original site. You know, they will brag about the reaction to that. So we never heard Jalen was anything less than solid. He's recruiting Ryan on campus last night. So I don't know where this stuff starts. And I know people get mad because we're not out here confirming room. That's not our job. Our job's not to speculate. You know, our job's not to say.
We chase news. We don't, potential news for sure. I mean,
obviously. You've got a platform to be tricked. You know, you've got a platform to let them trick you. But, I mean, our job is just to confirm and, figure everything out. Just like T-Rob, it took hours and hours and hours to make sure we knew that he had interviewed on Sunday before we reported it. But we never heard Jalen. We never heard that Mbakwe was less than solid. A lot of times I don't use social like a lot of people do. I don't think it's gospel. I use it for if somebody says, hey, did you see that dunk by Steph Curry? I'm assuming he can dunk. I will go to Twitter and put in Steph Curry dunk and I'll find it. So I'm assuming that came from social, but I'm not sure. We never heard Jalen was anything less than solid. But I'm not surprised that support. I mean, I think they just got on campus. That's a good question. I'm sorry to go back into it, but they just got on campus, right? They just settled in. They just unpacked their underwear and socks, put them in a drawer, and then this happened. So there's a lot. Now, we'll say outside of the recruiting process, they really hadn't been strong time spent with the majority of the staff that left. I mean, they certainly knew them during the recruiting process, but as players, they really hadn't been in that room with them a whole lot. So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by anybody that stays, and I'm not going to be surprised by anybody that hits the portal. And I'm not going to be surprised that anybody hits the portal who comes back or who hits the portal and leaves. I think every situation you have to address one by one. And
I don't know. I think with the class of 2024, I think the likelihood might be even greater a year from now that you see some of those guys.
See where you're at. I mean, and let's look. Some
come
of the guys
in. You're already there. A lot of these guys go through the process with the new staff. See how you fit in. See how you plug into some maybe potential playing time early in your career. Give it a feeling out process through next season. You get to this point in a year's time, and you can make that move.
And some of these guys were probably already on the verge, given heavy consideration, like Sean Murphy. He was probably already really considering it, maybe got talked out of it, maybe decided he didn't. Well, look, nobody wants to move.
Deontay's coming back. Jihad Campbell's coming back. We talked about this yesterday. Some of this goes back to specifics at your position too that don't really have anything to do with the coaching change, right?
So the coaching change could have just gently pushed you over to the other side, because a lot of these guys, Isaiah Bond, we told you, was back and forth early on, happy at Bama. But if you hit that portal and you're committed before you've met the coach and bragging you wouldn't talk to him, I mean, you had a foot out the door anyways. And good luck to them. It's their prerogative, their decision.
Absolutely. So Roll Tide _YNWA here in the mailbag. Most likely point when players will realistically be completely comfortable with the new schemes on both sides, assuming changes on D. He wonders, is it game one? Is it midseason? Are the playoffs next season? See what I did there? He asked.
I see. We see.
Expectations are what your expectations are. Yeah. I mean, a 12-team playoff, I get it. I see what you're doing there.
I would say after the spring, they'll have a pretty good idea of where they fit in. I mean, I don't think it's going to be. I mean, it's not two different sports they're playing. They're not going from football to baseball, so terminology might be different. I think the coaching staffs will adjust and make that easier for them. I mean, I like the question. It's a good question, but I do think you go through the spring, all those practices, because you've had hours of studying up to the spring, and then you get to go through the spring, see what you did right, see what you did wrong. So I would say, the spring. I mean, because you saw last year, Alabama was very familiar with that system for the most part and took, several games to really get where they wanted to go. And even at the end, weren't quite where they wanted to be. So
I
do want to
think
touch. Go ahead, Travis.
I think roster leadership within your roster has a lot to do with that. It's not just all tangible. And I think tangibly, Alabama, from a personnel perspective, transitions fine into whatever schemes that come in. And I think the schemes will be comparable, at least, to what Alabama has done under Nick Saban on both sides of the ball. But that's where bringing back Deontay Lawson and having Jalen Milroe back and some guys at some critical positions can help with that, help speed up that process a little bit. And again, this is still a very talented roster. And if it remains fairly intact going into spring practice, I can see the absorption and the carryover onto the field taking place in a relatively short period of time. And it's going to have to, because you got Georgia in September, you got the trip to Madison to take on Wisconsin early in the season. So it is what it is, to use
I want to touch on my buddy Bama Fan Ones. He had the most absurd question ever, Travis.
Oh, I see that now.
Still make Charlie Potter bring the Krispy Kremes and coffee every day.
He's got it backwards, doesn't he?
We cannot make Charlie do anything, for the record.
Charlie's more of a diva than some of these
Charlie's
people.
Charlie's kind of like a hibernating bear. It's best if he's left alone. He will do what he's got to do. He's going to do what he's supposed to do.
At a very high level.
Never have to ask him, never to do something, never have to tell him. But I damn sure not ask him to bring me donuts.
I wouldn't know. I would not.
I wouldn't even ask him where he got the donuts. I would just Google the nearest donut and go get my own.
Yeah.
We love us some Charlie, though.
We love us some Charlie. There's no doubt about it.
Disney We're scared of him, but we love
Charlie Potter. Disney adult Charlie Potter. We love him.
He loves
absolutely. There's your roundtable mailbag, Tim. I think we've hit on most of, not all of it, here in the last 24 hours. But it's been a lot of fun, as always. You bring a lot of great insight to us, and hopefully it's been
y'all for the questions.
And fun. Yeah, the questions.
Thank y'all for the questions. I mean, and being around BOL. And again, we hope you like and subscribe to the page and stay on the roundtable. We'll be doing more of these. I mean, there's going to be excitement. I mean, me and Travis could be talking here in 2 hours. I mean, there's no telling what the news brings. Like, we're on this, and Mason Short decommitted. So there hadn't really been a moment. Have you found a 3-hour window where nothing happened?
Not really.
I mean, maybe at like, the late night, midnight, 1 o'clock to 6 a.m. It's been kind of quiet. But then again, when you're constantly having stuff pop off, you don't really get that comfort level of nothing's happening. You thinking, oh crap, I'm asleep. What's happening?
Right now, overnight. Absolutely. Well, Tim, look forward to doing this again, probably real soon.
All right. Look forward. And thank you guys for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you all for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out with us at BamaOnLine.com. And as Tim has said, and I've said, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on those notifications. You'll get all this video content as it drops. We would certainly appreciate you doing that. For Tim Watts, Travis Reier. Until next time, so long, everybody.